What if spiritual growth doesn't mean leaving suffering behind? Have you ever come across spiritual teachings that left you feeling confused? Not because it didn't sound peaceful, but because it didn't sound inclusive or loving. Lately, I've been seeing more and more posts that say things like, as humanity shifts into the new earth, we stop participating in the suffering of the old earth. Or don't engage with people who are living in fear because that feeds the darkness. And I do understand the intention behind those teachings. I think many people are trying to point towards something extremely important. I think they're trying to say, don't become consumed by fear. Don't respond to hatred with hatred. Don't lose yourself in cycles of conflict. I actually agree with that. I don't think healing happens by becoming more reactive. But I have found myself sitting with a question I can't quite let go of. If the people who have done the most healing withdraw from the people who are still suffering, who helps reduce the suffering? I'm Alison Batty Capps of Blossoming Heart Wellness. As both a therapist and a spiritual mentor, I don't experience healing or the spirit world in that way. In fact, my own journey has taken me almost in the opposite direction. There was a time in my life when I believed spirituality meant staying peaceful no matter what. If I felt grief, if I felt fear, if I felt anger, part of me quietly believed that I must not be spiritually evolved enough. Looking back now, I realized something very different was happening. I wasn't free from emotion. I was afraid of emotion. I thought difficult emotions meant I had somehow fallen into a lower vibration that made me less valuable than those that were at peace all the time. However, as I have continued healing, something unexpected has happened. I stopped seeing emotions as evidence that something was wrong with me. Instead, I began seeing them as holding valuable information. Grief tells me that something precious has been lost. Fear tells me that something inside me or inside someone else doesn't feel safe. Anger often tells me that a boundary has been crossed or harm has occurred. Those emotions don't feel like my enemy. They actually seem to be invitations to become more conscious and more compassionate. As a therapist, I've also seen something that continually humbles me. Healing rarely happens because regulated people disappear from the lives of deregulated people. Healing often happens because someone is able to stay present without becoming reactive. That does not mean that they're not having emotions. It means that they're not reacting from them. They're also not rescuing. They're also not enabling. They're also not sacrificing themselves, but they are remaining connected. Think about the moments in your own life when someone helped you when you were struggling. Was it because they walked away from your pain? Or was it because they stayed present with you in a way that helped your nervous system slowly discover safety again? From everything that I have experienced, both personally and professionally, it has almost always been the second. There have been, of course, times when people couldn't sit with me and help me regulate, and I had to find my way into healing alone and become self-sufficient. However, that did not heal the underlying wound, which was I had been abandoned to sit with my difficult emotions as a child and not taught how to move through them. So it's complicated. We often benefit from relationships that help us be with our difficult emotions so that we too can learn to sit with them. So this has completely changed how I think about consciousness. I no longer believe that spiritual growth means becoming untouched by suffering or never experiencing lower vibrational emotions. I think it means becoming capable of touching the suffering within not only others, but in ourselves without losing our capacity to love. Notice the difference. One asks us to move away from suffering. The other asks us to move towards it with wisdom, love, and healthy boundaries. I absolutely believe we should not respond to hatred with hatred, but I also don't believe that love or peace asks us to abandon people simply because they are struggling and we're worried that that might bring up low vibrations in ourselves. In my work, I've watched this unfold over and over again. When someone is angry, instead of reacting to their anger, I become curious. What is the anger protecting? Very often underneath it, it is fear or shame or grief or loneliness, and most often disconnection from love. When I stay long enough for those vulnerable emotions to emerge in the other person, something remarkable begins to happen. The protection starts softening, not because I fixed them, but because I remained present long enough for their nervous system to discover it was safe enough to be vulnerable, and that helped them feel love. Love is what heals. That's why it makes me wonder if we've sometimes misunderstood what higher consciousness actually is. Maybe higher consciousness isn't escaping humanity. Maybe it's becoming more capable of loving humanity, not making excuses for those that cause harm, holding them accountable without causing additional harm. This includes the parts of humanity that are frightened, the parts that are grieving, the parts that have made mistakes. Because if consciousness supposedly expands love, wouldn't our circle of compassion become larger instead of smaller? Wouldn't we become more capable of sitting beside suffering without becoming consumed by it? Wouldn't healing make us more relational instead of leading to more separation? And I do not claim to know the answers. I am generally exploring these questions. But today, if someone asked me what higher consciousness looks like, I don't think I'd describe it as someone who is never affected by another person's pain. I think it describes someone who has developed the capacity to remain deeply connected to themselves while also remaining deeply connected to others. Someone who can hold healthy boundaries without closing their heart. Someone who can respond to fear without becoming fear. Someone who can witness suffering without abandoning people who are suffering. For me, that is what love looks like. And perhaps that's what consciousness has been inviting us toward all along. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think spiritual maturity looks like? Does it move us away from people who are struggling? Or does it expand our capacity to love them wisely? Those are the questions I think are worth exploring together. And if this resonates, I hope you'll consider following. Or if you want to go deeper, I invite you to read my book, The Divine Within, Healing Ourselves to Heal the World, to explore how our emotions are actually doorways to the divine. And if you're interested in learning how to work and be with your challenging emotions and build capacity to not only feel what's present in yourself, but shift it so that you can also have capacity to be with others when they are struggling, I invite you to consider working with me. You can go to my website, blossomingheartwellness.com, to learn more about my approach. I'm sending you deep love and appreciation for who you are, no matter what your perspective is.